Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Welcome. It's great to have you back for another virtual program. This one is part of our Behind the Exhibition series. I am Katie Dolgov, the Exhibitions Manager and Registrar at OMA. And I really appreciate you spending the evening with us to learn a little bit more about our exhibition, Gifted, Collecting the Art of California at Gardena High School, 1919 through 1956. And of course, title sponsors, Brom and Sandra Dykstra. Many, many great thanks to them for helping us host this exhibition. So I want to tell you a little bit, just a little housekeeping here about our interactive features for our virtual programs. You will see the chat box on the side. Go ahead and throw any chat in there that you want to share with the community. This is a community conversation and you can go wild over there. And then at the end of the program, we're going to carve out 10 to 15 minutes for a Q&A. At the bottom of your screen, you will see a little button that says Q&A, so go ahead and click on that if you have questions throughout the program at any time, and we will try to get to those, all of them, at the end. So OMA is so pleased to be the third venue for this traveling exhibition, Gifted, that was installed at the museum last July and then open for visitors to see in person September through December. Of course, it's been viewable virtually outside of those months at www.oma-online.org/gifted. And I just put that in the chat there in case you want to check it out. If you click on that link, you'll be able to see photos from the exhibition installed and images of all of the artwork that's in the exhibition, kind of clicking through a little tour of the gallery. We are really pleased to be able to offer this virtual program now that our galleries are not open to the public, so that visitors can learn more about the exhibition straight from curator Susan M. Anderson while our galleries are closed. So in case you're not familiar with the exhibition or you'd like a little refresher, this exhibition was created over the course of 37 years until 1956. And each semester, the graduating class of Gardena High School in Los Angeles would select, purchase, and donate an artwork by a local living artist to the school, ultimately creating a remarkable collection of work by California masters. So over the years, this became a community galvanizing effort with community members participating in fundraising and helping prepare the exhibit of the artwork, or viewing the exhibit of the artwork and celebrating it. It's really a beautiful story of how arts engagement promotes civic participation and strengthens a community. Well, tonight we're going to be learning about some really fun stories behind the artwork in the exhibition with a curator, Susan M. Anderson, as I mentioned, whom you can now see on my screen. Hi, Susan. This is the second exhibition we've worked on at OMA with Susan. The first was San Diego's Surreal in 2019. Susan is a specialist in 20th century American art with a focus of the art of California. She is a former curator of Laguna Art Museum, and for several years, she's been an independent museum curator, organizing exhibitions, writing, and producing publications for regional institutions. She has an MA in art history and museum studies from USC, University of Southern California, and was on the West Coast Advisory Board of the Smithsonian Institution from 1988 to 2002. So really, she is an expert in this field, and her joy and enthusiasm and scholarly expertise comes through in everything she does. It's very apparent through this exhibition. We're so lucky to be able to work with her. So Susan, hello, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. How are you this evening?
Great, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be able to do this.
Oh, we're so happy to be able to share this exhibition far and wide. It's so deserving of this. And you have all of the insight into the amazing stories behind the artwork. So let's get started. Let's dive right in. Susan, tell us, how did this high school art collection come about?
Well, in 1919, a new principal came to the school named John Whiteley. And he founded the art appreciation program. And really, I believe he had a vision. He could see that something special was happening in Los Angeles at the time, and decided to create a permanent collection of regional art at the school. So from 1919 to 1956, students in the senior class selected, purchased, and donated some 72 works of art to the high school as class gifts. Artists gave the students price breaks. The students raised funds by holding class plays, teas, and a banquet dinner, which we'll talk about more later. And the entire Gardena community joined in support of the program. Over the years, other artists, the federal art projects, and other individuals and organizations throughout Southern California also made a few gifts of art to the collection. In 1923, and this is a really unbelievable thing, the high school built a study hall auditorium designed to house what they anticipated would be a permanent collection of art. And it was known throughout Los Angeles as the Gardena High School Art Gallery.
Wow. So that in 1923, 1919, what was Gardena like at that time? I'm sure it's not like what Gardena is like right now, a little more suburban.
No, it has changed a lot. In 1919, the year the art collection was founded, Gardena was a small farming community in the southwest corner of Los Angeles. And there was a very low population density, a diverse populace, and a smaller wealth base than other parts of the county. Yet students were able to develop an exceptional art collection. It was an ethnically diverse student body. Although it changed over the decades, it seems the makeup of this overall student body at the 6-year school, because it went from 7th through 12th grade, the overall makeup was roughly a third Mexican American, a third Japanese American, and a third white and probably a little mixed. In the early 1920s, only about 15% of the high school students graduated, as they were needed to work in the agricultural fields. And even by 1940, the population was just under 6,000 residents. And it was still a farming community right up until the World War II period. There was a large population of Japanese farmers in the city and surrounding area, and strawberry farms were plentiful there, and it was known for its strawberries. And you can see oil derricks in the background that were also plentiful then in the Gardena Valley.
Yes, yes, I can see that in the bottom picture that was there. So that was a very different environment from what we're used to, the contemporary schools. Did the education respond to that environment? What was education like at GHS?
It was, it had an unusual approach to education. It had a holistic approach to education, or vocational, if you will, using hands-on teaching methods, along with the agriculture, because they continue to teach agriculture, English, Latin, mathematics, and science. Students also learned wood turning, carving, cooking, sewing, carpentry, forging, printing, and pattern making. The teaching of handicrafts at that time was thought to build character, and while encouraging moral behavior, intelligence, and industriousness. It was also, they felt, a practical approach for high school with a sizable population of farming families. So in 1919, Gardena High School still carried on this hands-on approach, but they weren't a full agricultural school anymore. And the art collecting program was really an outgrowth of that kind of teaching method, the hands-on teaching method. Please notice the open bed truck down in the lower right that the boys built using spare parts, because it will figure in a later story.
That is so amazing. I can't tell you how much I learned those things at high school. I wish I had learned those things at high school. Sewing, carpentry, forging. printing. That is so much fun, or it sounds like it would have been a lot of fun. So in 1919 and 1956, those were some turbulent years in history. A lot of things come to mind. Did the current events at the time influence the students' choices for this collection?
Well, you have to understand that during the years in which the collection was being formed, the Gardena High School students suffered through first World War I and the 1918 flu pandemic, the Great Depression, and then World War II. So, and that's when a third of the student body was sent to internment camps. So it was a very difficult time, actually.
Mm.
And as we'll see, these events are reflected in the works the students collected. Here we have the first work of art that was given to the collection by Ralph Davidson Miller. And this painting portrays an agricultural valley irrigated by the Santa Clara River near Santa Barbara. The loosely brushed foreground, you can see, sort of gives an impression of wild, fruitful nature, while that middle ground, a kind of a luminous meadow, suggests a heavenly pasture. Clouds hanging over the rocky outcropping in the distance seem to portend rain. You have some dead trees on the right, perhaps blasted by lightning, which heighten the painting's moodiness and dramatic quality. The painting may express the mood of the Gardena High School students that year. In 1919, the student body was recovering from the deadly second wave of the pandemic, and at least one of the students passed away. And they had an enforced influenza vacation the way that we do now.
Wow. Wow. That's really something we can really relate to.
And also, the seniors in particular were undergoing a period of adjustment and introspection and even mourning after the devastating effects of World War I, in which they lost at least 3 of their classmates, because a lot of the young men went off to war while they were really the age of a high school student. So these students were really feeling the weight of their future responsibility as men and women in a changed world.
Yeah, absolutely. They had just gone through the first Great War. Probably a lot of them lost brothers and possibly fathers in that war. So what a traumatic time for the nation and for these students. So, well, what other things might have influenced the selections the students were making?
Well, there were other reasons the students selected works of art. The fame of an artist, for example, and also their chance to meet them also played a part. The students were able to rub shoulders with these prominent artists in Los Angeles. They were able to visit their studios on field trips, and they hosted them at an annual banquet each year, which again, we'll talk about later. They visited John Mannheim several times and bought more than one painting from him. On the left is Mannheim's On the Road to San Gabriel, 1920, the second painting the students purchased for the collection.
I think we're waiting for the next slide here. There we go.
So Jack Wilkinson Smith was already nationally acclaimed before moving to Los Angeles around 1906 for award-winning sketches he made on the battlefield during the Spanish-American War that were published in prominent national newspapers. So he had a reputation. And when the Gardena students visited his studio in 1922, they were determined to own Lingering Snows, which was an unfinished painting on the artist's easel. And
Wow.
they went into a huddle without talking to the teacher or anything. They went into a huddle, and before the astonished teacher could stop them, one of the students walked up to Smith and said, "We have $200. Will you take it?" And Smith grinned and said, "Yeah." And apparently that was the end of the discussion. And the painting did end up in the collection. We don't know whether that students still had to vote on it like they usually did, or it was sort of a slam dunk. But I'm really glad they did, because it's one of my favorites. You can see it has a really dynamic composition. There's a brook sort of running through the painting in a zigzag between two stands of trees. You can see snow melting under a bright spring sky and almost feel the coldness of the water and the weak early spring sun beating down. It's really an amazing painting.
Yes, this one really is gorgeous. And I really wish all negotiations were that straightforward. It would make everyone's life a lot easier. So in this case, and we, oh, go ahead, Susan.
Well, I was going to say, usually the students paid $300 or $400.
Oh, wow. So that one was, they got a little bit of I guess you could call it a deal on that one. And you said it was still on his easel. So perhaps maybe when they made the offer, it was unfinished, or that's really, I love that. That takes a lot of chutzpah. All right, so in this case, we're seeing a new painting here on the screen. This painting's reflection of regional culture and the large Hispanic community of Gardena. Do we think, oh, I'm sorry, do we think this prompted the students' selection of this artwork, making it a little more appealing?
Yeah, I think so. I think in this case, it's really the reflection of the regional culture and the large Hispanic community that was the reason why the students selected it. Around the time that John Hubbard Rich painted the brass bowl, it was in an important exhibition in Los Angeles, an exhibition of the Group of Eight, which was a Los Angeles-based modernist group that was a tribute to the important New York painter named Robert Henry. And Robert Henry had started a regional direction among California artists to paint ethnically diverse populations of California. And he was in town in 1922 at the time that Rich made the painting, and at the time that the students selected it for the collection, not too long before they selected it. So in the painting, a young Hispanic woman gazes down, suggesting a possible ritual quality connoted by her focus on the brass bowl. But you can also see in the background a mosaic of color that's done in an impressionist manner. And it also shows that Rich had formerly studied with leading impressionist painters in Boston before coming out to California. And those impressionist painters in Boston were known for painting portraits of women of leisure, often shown engaging reading or other intellectual pursuits. So this is sort of an interesting hybrid of two very different ideas, but it's a beautiful painting.
Oh, yes, this is one of my favorite ones in the exhibition, and it doesn't come across quite as well in the screen. But when you're there in person, it's not just that hatching and patchwork of color in the background, but oh, it's such a dynamic mix of colors on her pink shawl as well. And yeah, it's a really beautiful one. I hope everyone gets to see this one in person at some point. So you mentioned the Principal Whitley saw something interesting happening in Los Angeles at the time he founded the collecting program. What was that? What were the strengths of the collection?
Well, most work selected by the students prior to the 1930s were by what we call California Impressionists now. And these are artists that worked outdoors, finishing their canvases in the field or in their studios, working from studies that they made out in the field. And plein air painting, which is what it's also called, was the primary painting movement in Southern California from about 1890 to 1930. So it was still very much going on when they started the collection. The painters were nationally known, and their paintings were purchased by collectors back in the Midwest and the East when they were shown in exhibitions there. And they were also highly sought after by tourists coming to Los Angeles and Laguna Beach. And what's really interesting is that in the 1890s, at the same time that Gauguin left France to find paradise in Tahiti, European and American artists were coming out to California looking for unspoiled paradise. And you can see this incredible waterfall that was right in the Arroyo Seco, with some hikers standing over to the right, if you look carefully. And this
Yes.
is the kind of thing that they came out looking for. And there it was, right in the Arroyo Seco, where all these artists sort of joined a community to come out and paint. And, you know, California provided new opportunities, a sense of hope, a fresh start. And the California Impressionists recorded this sense in Touched Bounty. And they were just very successful.
And these are two beautiful examples of California Impressionism here, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to show a few more examples. Probably won't go too deeply into them, but these are two of my favorites. And Hanson Duval Puthoff was very important to the collection. He was very close to the principal, and is the one that suggested the art banquet and the annual exhibition.
Uh-huh. And another couple of really gorgeous ones.
And these are by really important artists from that period. Edgar Payne started the Laguna Beach Art Association with Anna Hills, and Carl Oscar Borg was a very important early artist also, who spent a lot of time among the Indians and painting the Grand Canyon. William Wendt, however, is considered the dean of California Impressionist painters. And along the Arroyo Seco is an exemplary painting by him. It's full of green, the color of hope and of spring. And you really get a sense of a new beginning and divine abundance from Wendt's work. It's sort of a quintessential expression of California's bounty. Wendt's landscapes he tried to express a state of kind of immersion in nature, articulating his deeply held beliefs about God and nature. He was actually a pretty religious man, and he tried to express something through his art that was quite remarkable.
I think there it is.
Yeah, so I wanted to just show one of the letters that was sent to the school. William Wendt was very much behind the collecting program, and he sent more than one letter to the school encouraging the students and the principal. This is a letter he sent in 1931 saying that although he wasn't able to send a painting that year because he had an art exhibition at a gallery called the Stendhal Galleries at the same time, that he still said, "It is gratifying to me that the students of your school show a lively interest in art. It will help them to appreciate the beauties in nature. May the good work continue." I love that last sentence. And you know, Principal Whiteley kept up a correspondence, especially in the beginning when the whole project was a little smaller. He kept up a good correspondence with the painters. He sent them invitations to exhibit and thanked them for their participation. So there are numerous letters from artists found in a scrapbook kept by the students at the school. And that scrapbook was from about 1928 to 1933, some of the very most important years when they were founding the whole thing. And we presume there were other scrapbooks, but we no longer know what happened to them. But I found out a lot of the information that I have from that one scrapbook. It was kind of an amazing, it was almost a miracle.
What an incredible find, and how forward thinking of them to preserve those documentations of so much of the important beginnings of this collection. Okay, so you did mention the banquet earlier on. So tell me more about this annual art banquet and the exhibition that the students and the Gardena community put on each year between 28 and 55.
All right, so in 1928, Hanson Puthoff met with Principal Whiteley, and he recommended that they start a different program. And so in addition to sending small groups of students to artist studios, they decided that the high school began to invite 100 regional artists to submit paintings to an annual exhibition. And it was called the Purchase Prize exhibit. And they installed this each spring for 3 weeks in the school's library and study hall. The school also had a banquet dinner at which the students acted as hosts. They served the meal, they cleaned up, they did it all.
Mhm.
It was a wonderful annual event that many of the prominent artists attended, and there were speakers and musical offerings. And probably the most interesting thing that happened was that the artists that came were roasted by a Toastmaster who gave the audience an insider's view of the artistic community. So the students really got to feel like they got to know these people. Well, this was in 1928. As you know, the Depression hit the following year in 1929, just a few months after graduation. And the project was almost shut down. The whole community then got involved to make it possible to continue the banquet, the exhibition, and the purchase prize, forming the Gardena Art Association. Because the students did need to pay $300 and $400 for the 2 paintings that they bought each year. And it took approximately 500 to 800 people, students and community volunteers, to pull off this enormous event. All the senior students participated in the organization of the exhibition and acted as hosts at afternoon teas and other special events, creating a tradition of public service. So the Wednesday Progressive Club, the Pacific Art Association, the Japanese clubs from across Los Angeles, they all came and they would have a meeting, often their annual meeting, at the school during the run of the show. And the students would serve tea and that sort of thing. And I think that maybe this helped to raise funds. I'm not sure about that. But Gardena High School had a very busy 3 weeks because of that, as well as the fact that the public was invited to come to the school in the evening and after school during the run of the show. And that's why it took so many people to make this happen, because they had to have people there guarding the paintings and such. So you can see the exhibition catalog on the right, and that's something that the students themselves printed in the printing workshop. So this again was part of the hands-on project. And then on the left is that annual banquet, and you can see the students wearing servers' outfits and parents sitting at the tables. And one of the tables would have been filled with artists. That may not be on view, or it may be the table on the far right. In any event, you can tell that it was a very big event each year.
And I bet very, very fun for the students and the parents to be able to meet and chat with the artists. What an incredible opportunity for young people.
So these were the paintings purchased by the students in 1929. Again, Clarence Hinkle was another kind of an early modernist and also an adept at Impressionism. And Maurice Braun was an important painter from San Diego. The Purchase Prize exhibits were impressive and invariably covered by the chief critic for the Los Angeles Times and even national publications such as the Christian Science Monitor. The annual was a primary exhibition venue for Southern California artists until the 1950s. There weren't many of these large exhibitions for regional artists. Many of the galleries that had shown these artists closed during the Depression. So this exhibition was extremely important to artists, not only as a way to show their work, but also because other schools were able to buy art out of the same exhibition for the right price, of course. But this was a way that other schools came to the Gardena High School, saw a painting, and may have been able to try to get it for their own school collection. Because after Gardena High School started this, it became sort of a thing in Los Angeles among the other high schools.
Man, I wish my high school had done that. Unfortunately, not all of the schools kept it up. By the time I was in high school in Los Angeles, that was not happening. This is an amazing, we need to bring this back.
Well, this was the Gardena High School library in 1933, and I wanted you to see it because it gives people a sense of the student body and also the lovely campus. We were able to date the photo, which was, again, just found in that scrapbook without any notation, because of the paintings on display in the annual exhibition. Back in the corner above the bookcases is a painting that was one of the paintings that was purchased that year, which I'll show you in a minute. This was during one of the worst years of the Great Depression. By 1930, bread lines were already forming in Los Angeles. By 1931, an unbelievable 10,000 transients were arriving in Los Angeles County every month looking for work. And 350,000 farmers and their families would soon head west in an epic migration seeking a better life. So this was a really difficult time. But I think that the photograph gives you an idea of the wonderful atmosphere at the school when art was an integral part of the students' lives from 7th through the 12th grade. Mm-hmm. And you know, when the exhibition was taken down, then they put other paintings back up that would remain. And I think that's when we would have seen maybe, well, we'll talk about some of the paintings that might have been hung there as we go along. So this is the painting that was back in that corner by William Henry Price, called Towering Peak Sierras, and it was purchased by the winter class in 1933. They actually didn't have the funds to buy this until December of that year. Normally they would have been able to purchase it soon after the spring event. But because of the Depression, the students could only afford to buy one painting that year. They were only able to raise that much. So students and others in the community must have been working over the rest of the year, getting money together to help the students buy the painting. But by now, art was going to start to undergo changes, which would eventually be reflected in the students' choices, because California Impressionism or landscape paintings like this would become almost obsolete during the Depression. During the Depression era, art began to reflect other concerns due to the difficult economic and social conditions of the times. Artists began to reflect the world around them, its culture, its peoples, and rural and urban life. And here you get a really sense of that. On the left, we have Emil Cosa Jr.'s Every Cloud Has Its Silver Lining, a farm, which would have really appealed to the students. And Robert Clooney's painting called River Dwellers on the right, which is really a very typical sort of regionalist scene out of the daily life of some people that live on a river. So that's more typical of what people started to do during the Depression era, what artists painted. During the Depression era, Maynard Dixon, who painted this painting called Men of the Red Earth, was one of the few artists in California that actually depicted the difficult social and economic conditions of the times. He painted displaced workers, maritime strikes, paintings with social commentary. But he's really better known, actually, for his Western themes and for drawing upon the Southwest Native American culture. Southern Utah, near Zion National Park, where he resided much of the year, was the setting of some of his most powerful art. And Dixon and his wife, the photographer Dorothea Lange, who many people have heard of before, with whom he was married from 1920 to 1935, they used to travel together throughout that area, that arid land of the desert, seeking inspiration for their art. And Dixon developed a really kind of stark, rhythmic approach to painting the desert. sort of exposing the natural architectural forms of the landscape. And you can see that landscape on the left-hand side of the painting. Well, I just finally got to go down and visit Maynard Dixon's home, which is still there near Mount Zion. And it looks very much like that. I was quite amazed that I saw some landscapes that looked very much like that. Men of the Red Earth is an example of Dixon's work, mature work of the 1930s. This kind of iconic romanticized image of Native Americans looking out over a vast expanse of desert has really been simplified to its barest elements. And Dixon sort of juxtaposes that sort of abstract painting with the tangible three-dimensional forms of the two men, while emphasizing stoicism and solemn dignity in the men. In the land, he underscores the ordered abstract structure of the land, endowing the whole with a sense of the eternal. And one gets a feeling that it's not a particular time, but it's all time. It's a really beautiful painting. This painting tells an interesting story of a completely different kind. So in April 1934, the Gardena Valley News reported that the winter class had selected Pyramids of the Desert by Charles L.A. Smith as their purchase. And for quite a while, I was really stumped. I was wondering why the painting by Smith in the collection purchased that year was called Monterey Pines. So I discovered by chance something that told the story. Before she passed away, one of the alumna that helped to save the collection early on, named Rosemary Parrish Best, sent me a trove of material, copies of emails, scraps of paper, Gardena High School yearbooks, just a bag of stuff. Mm-hmm. I went through it. And among the old emails was one from a former student who admitted he had been driving that open bed truck when it happened, that he had only been going 35 miles per hour. The painting that the students had just purchased flew out of the truck and was gone.
Oh my. Oh no. So Pyramids of the Desert.
I mean, that was an aspect of this whole project, is the students actually went around Los Angeles to all these places and picked up the art.
Oh my gosh, hands-on from start to finish.
Paintings. Some of them were delivered, but most of them were picked up by the students. So Monterey Pines was obviously the replacement, and it was most likely donated by the artist to the students. The painting shows a road leading through the pine and cypress forest of Pebble Beach, down to the shoreline, where Samuel F.B. Morse III had opened a golf course in 1925 that's still there. Mm-hmm. And you can't tell unless you're right in front of the painting, but there are sand traps and tiny golfers framed in the distance, with the lavender and blue of the Pacific Ocean behind. And this is one of my favorite paintings. I really love this painting.
I do too. I really love that painting. I'm glad that one ended up in the collection. I haven't seen a photo of the pyramids one yet, if one exists. So I would have loved to have known what got lost in the wilderness. Anyway, so what exactly did the students do in the process of selecting each class gift? How did that go down?
Well, so in addition to their visits to the artist studios and galleries, because they did do that too, the students took a required class called Senior Problems, which devoted weeks of instruction to the issues involved in choosing the class painting, and it was required for graduation. The students attended talks by artists and critics and applied a list of questions to the paintings in order to learn how to perceive not only color and draftsmanship, but numerous other aspects of art. So 10 paintings were chosen for extended examination. Students learned to analyze the elements of light and shade, composition, centers of interest, and other aspects such as the vibration of colors. Exposure to the paintings for 3 weeks afforded the students, teachers, and visiting artists sufficient time to discuss the essential qualities of the works. Besides cultivating a genuine appreciation of art, the collection also offered practical benefits to other students studying painting techniques in art classes, for example, or English students that were going to be able to write essays about the paintings. The voting process apparently was collaborative, and it was an effort of just weeding the choices down through votes until a majority consensus was reached. It took time and did not happen in a day. There was a lot of discussion back and forth.
Yeah,
And
I can imagine.
this is Gardena High School in 1935. I don't think it always was a very amicable. I think sometimes the boys won out.
Of course, right. There could have been a boys versus girls contingent. I'm sure there were some arguments, and it wasn't always as easy as walking up to a painting on an easel and offering $200 and the discussion over. So aside from the paintings that the students purchased, what were some of the other works that ended up in the collection?
Well, some other works were donated by a federal program called the Public Works of Art Program, which was instituted in 1934 by the federal government to help employ artists during the Depression. And they donated Cats at Play to the collection in that year. Although during that program, many high schools received murals and had murals painted on their walls during the program. Instead, the Public Works of Art program decided to donate paintings, which makes sense because they knew that Gardena High School was starting this permanent collection.
Mm-hmm.
They probably allocated play to Gardena High School because of its large Asian population. Because Don Smith had attended the Art Students League in Los Angeles, where a lot of Japanese American students studied. And a kind of an East-West fusion style arose at the school, combining design and motifs from Asian art with MacDonald Wright's high-keyed synchronous color theories. He was one of the famous artists that taught at the school. So this Asian fusion arose in part because of the many Japanese Americans that studied at the Art Students League and contributed to the style. Sadly, along that line, although we know that several works of art created by Japanese American modernists were donated to the school, we don't know what happened to them or where they are now, but apparently there were some in the collection prior to World War II. This is another painting that was donated, and this actually is a mural-sized painting, quite impressive, that came into the collection, but we don't know who donated it or why or when. But it was painted in 1934 or 1936. I guess maybe 1934. And it may have been donated also by the Public Works of Art project, but there's just not enough documentation. But it shows the ascending importance of the aerospace industry to Southern California's economy beginning in the 1930s. In the middle, you see a woman holding a baby looking left towards images of a gold mining camp. In other words, she looks to the past. Her husband, holding a pickaxe, gazes right towards airplanes, clouds, and a metal truss structure, emblematic of the new materials and technologies that the aerospace industry would bring. The man looks to the future, but you can see he still has one foot in the past. So it's a really interesting painting that really does show how, like gold prospectors drawn to Northern California in search of riches, new pioneers were attracted to the Southland by the prospect of employment in the aerospace industry. And this really took off in the post-war era, but also started up before. during World War II. Well, as I mentioned earlier, during the years in which the collection was being formed, the students suffered through World War II. And this is one of the paintings that seems to reflect the students' feelings about the war. In 1943, the students selected Jesse Arms Botke's Cranes Under a Giant Fern, most likely as a tribute to the large community of Japanese American students missing from the campus. The students and their families had been forcibly relocated to internment camps in 7 states after America's entrance into World War II, thereby reducing the size of the Gardena High School classes by 30%. This internment of Japanese Americans was a result of just xenophobia and racism after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and it's now considered one of the most atrocious violations of American civil rights of the 20th century. Jessie Arms Botke is celebrated for her stylized depictions of exotic birds in lush gardens with backgrounds of 22-karat gold. That golden color is actually gold leaf. Botke drew her inspiration from Japanese screens of the Edo period, which featured very much the same thing, cranes in spare garden settings with gold leaf backgrounds. The crane symbolized longevity and immortality. And Botke had first appropriated the image of the crane soon after the turn of the 20th century for use in some luxurious decorative tapestries she designed for Herder Looms, which was one of the biggest New York decorating companies. And this beautiful painting's on the cover of the catalog, which was designed by Garland Kirkpatrick. Okay, Lauren Barton's image of 2 women in a migrant camp, exhausted at the end of a day's work, is a commentary on the difficult social and economic times of the Depression. Again, it may be a Depression era painting, but it may be something else. But this is a time when a number of people poured into the state looking for work in the farm industry. One of the women is holding a baby, her wedding ring clearly showing on her finger. The other is so tired she can no longer keep her eyes open. And in the background, you can see the tent community. However, the painting isn't dated, so it could also allude to the federal manual laborer program that invited Mexican temporary workers into the United States to fill a labor shortage in agriculture from 1942 to 1964. The program promised decent living conditions in labor camps and a small wage, protection from discrimination, but more specifically, the painting refers to the plight of women who joined the agricultural labor force with their families living in tents and makeshift homes. And obviously, because Gardena was a community, an agricultural community, the painting would have been especially meaningful for students at the school who traditionally began working in the fields when they were children and often continued to do so throughout their high school years.
So definitely minorities were represented in the artwork, and the students were a very diverse population, but did they collect from artists of minority backgrounds?
Well, no, they didn't really, not really. Nor did they collect many women either. And the collection really inevitably reflects the unfortunate Anglo-cultural domination over non-white population, or the dominance of white male artists. And it's not that women artists didn't contribute, didn't send their paintings to the exhibitions, because about a third of the paintings looked to me like they were by women. But it was the male artists that had the reputations, and those are the ones the students went for until they all went away to war during World War II. And then a lot of women were left on campus, and more women's paintings entered the collection then, which I think is very interesting. We find it very interesting also to see that the students elected to collect Joba Anogano's Indian Nocturne or Ceremonial Night, which he finished at the end of World War II. Anogano spent over 10 years exploring natural lighting effects while painting on location under the full moon. That must have been pretty difficult.
Yes.
Ceremonial Night appears to show two warriors who have emerged from the dark and are waiting for their moment to come out of hiding. While Anogano pays a lot of attention to the figure's ceremonial dress, such as the ethereal silvery features of their headdresses. And he was really good at capturing those kind of effects. The painting raises many questions. Does it refer to the ghost dance, a ceremonial circle dance and spiritual movement that was believed to reunite the living with the spirits of the dead and aid in bringing an end to white colonial domination of the Native Americans? Does the otherworldly light of the moon cast the warriors in the role of spirits waiting to join the ghost dance? That's a possibility too. We know he finished the painting soon after World War II, when he had served in the United States Air Force. While Anogano, who identified as a member of the Cherokee Nation, dedicated his art and other activities to promoting their Native American culture. Well, with the formal end of World War II on August 14th, 1945, Southern California entered a new era. It was an era marked by the post-war boom, and it really hit Gardena very hard. In the post-World War II era, art went through numerous changes, and so did Gardena. It really, it just became filled with housing and a lot of the agricultural fields disappeared quite quickly. The students began to accept works into the collection that reflected modernist influences, such as abstraction, cubism, and surrealism, which were finally gaining prominence in Los Angeles art of the 1950s. Due to Francis de Erdely's strongly anti-war, anti-Nazi paintings, he was forced to flee Europe in 1939. He arrived in Southern California a few years later in 1944, carrying the torch of European expressionism and existentialism in paintings that were sometimes sort of darkly emotive and very figurative. He was very highly regarded, and he taught for many years at USC. Many artists over the centuries have depicted the return of the prodigal son, which is what this depicts. De Erdely's brilliant interpretation of the story is compelling in its drama and depth of feeling, which is emphasized by the encircling of the father and son's arms, creating a kind of nest for their love. It's a very tender painting. Well, this is one of the last works of art to enter the Gardena High School art collection. Enigmatic and Mysterious, this surrealist painting by Robert Watson offers up a series of questions as well. The tiny people appear to be waiting, but waiting for what? Who or what remains? The painting is called Remains. Is this consciously or unconsciously an anti-war statement following the dropping of the bomb on Hiroshima? Robert Watson painted Remains soon after his cover for the second edition of Ray Bradbury's The Martian Chronicles went to press in 1953. You can see a poster that was created for the release of the book that Robert Watson also designed. So think about it. Watson's painting, with its undeniable pop appeal, would have really stood out in the Purchase Prize exhibit. With his work on the cover of a book everyone was reading, Watson's prestige would have been really high. It's just the kind of thing that would have appealed to the students. His work represents the point in the development of American science fiction and fantasy literature when it began to be visually represented by art with surrealist underpinnings.
Now we are getting really close to our time here. I wanted to skip over the next couple of slides because you answer a question that someone has already popped into the Q&A box about why the senior class started collecting. So I was wondering if you could maybe go through that one really quick. We'll skip the next slide and the slide after that, and we'll talk about why they stopped collecting quickly, and maybe then we can still get through a few more from the Q&A box.
All right. Well, at the end of the 1956 school year, the principal announced the end of the program. That's because in 1956, when Gardena High School moved to the current campus, to accommodate the post-war boom, there was just so many more students suddenly. They just had to change. They had to change their priorities. And they included a small art gallery, but it was very small, with room for only about 15 paintings, whereas, 75 to 100 paintings had been hanging before. So the city of Gardena was just undergoing unbelievably rapid expansion and change, as was the community. So the value of the paintings went up significantly in the 1970s, and that they had started to put them away already, making them unavailable for viewing until 1999, when an exhibition happened at Cal State University Dominguez Hills called Painted Light, and that had 31 paintings. That was really the first effort to sort of bring the collection back. And but however, except for a few paintings that went on long-term loan to the Autry Museum, the collection really went back into storage in a small closet on the Gardena High School campus. Shockingly, when I interviewed the new principal at the school in 2014, she said the collection was a mystery that nobody talked about. None of the faculty, staff, or students even knew the collection existed.
That is incredible. This amazing collection, just buried gold at the institution. So it's amazing that this exhibition has even come to be. And wow, those are some great stories behind the artwork. Thank you so much, Susan, for telling us about all that. So just to get a few questions in from the Q&A, we'll do the best we can. There's a quick one I can answer here. Is the exhibition still at OMA? And if so, for how long? Yes, the exhibition is still at the museum. It is in 2 parts, and the exhibition will close on March 14th, where we've got it in the upstairs gallery and the downstairs gallery. It's a very large exhibition. So the exhibition closes on March 14th. Of course, we don't know, nobody knows if the galleries will be able to be open again to the public before March 14th. That isn't entirely up to the California governor. But Susan, I believe this exhibition might be traveling on to another venue after OMA. So perhaps, I want to say it's up in Ventura. So perhaps any of our visitors. Susan, am I correct? Do you know anything about that?
I don't know if it's really been settled yet. So
okay, it's considering. Yeah, no, hopefully, hopefully this exhibition gets to be seen by more than everybody, just everybody. So here's another question I definitely don't know the answer to. Did any of the students go on to become artists or well-known or dedicated educators? Do you know?
Many of them went on to become dedicated educators. And in fact, the board that oversaw this whole project and is in charge of caring for the collection, preserving it, and for the ongoing legacy of the collection are educators, a lot of them. And a few of them went on to become artists, not as many as you would expect. I know that some people's parents collected out of the exhibition as it went along, so it did inspire art collecting, but it was more a love of art that was inspired. None of the students created any of the paintings in this collection. This isn't that kind of a collection. And that's what I think people expect when they hear about a high school art collection. But this one did not have any paintings done by students.
Yes, yes. And has this is a really interesting question. Has the collection ever been appraised? And do we know what the value of the collection is? Is that something we can share?
The value of the collection is quite high, and that's why it needs to be well taken care of and well and put into storage properly and stored carefully. It's actually very valuable, several $1 million.
Yes, I can only imagine. I mean, the students had really great taste. They were able to connect with some big names of the time and names that only became bigger throughout history. So we are so incredibly lucky to have been able to host this exhibition, for many of our visitors to be able to see it in person, to learn about this beautiful educational opportunity, this civic engagement. So Susan, thank you so much for sharing your time and such fun and fascinating stories from history. It's really been a pleasure, not just spending time with you this evening, but throughout the whole exhibition, planning the exhibition start to finish and getting it into our galleries. It's been wonderful working with you, and I'm just very grateful. And it's an amazing, inspiring collection. I hope our visitors have been inspired as well. So
Well,
thank you, Susan.
I certainly hope people get to see it in person. And I just want to thank you, Katie, and Adam, and all the staff at the museum for the dedication that you've shown to the exhibition. It's really wonderful, and I hope people get to see it in person.